Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show here on Freedom 95, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM across central Indiana, and broadcast worldwide on freedom95.us simulcast. So the focus on this show today is our Do Nothing Congress. We are past 115 days of this congressional session, and they have done nothing but fund Joe Biden's priorities through the continuing resolution that funded the government at Biden levels. You know, President Trump was president then, folks. And what is our Congress doing? They are passing legislation funding Biden's priorities into the Trump term. Trump's been in office 100 days now. And Jim Banks and Aaron Houchin and Todd Young, all these folks are just sitting there in Washington saying, no, we like Joe Biden's funding. Let's do that instead. We didn't vote for Joe Biden. We voted for Donald J. Trump to be our president.
That's correct.
You know, the House of Representatives has worked only 25 days out of the 105 days of 2025 so far. These people don't deserve a full salary. You know, Jim Banks, he missed 30% of the votes last time I checked.
Absentee Banks.
And they're not even, they don't even have to go into work that often.
No. It's a sweet gig if you think about it.
It's a very sweet gig. So what have they not done? Well, let's get into this. They still have not codified one of Trump's executive orders. They still have not passed the SAVE Act. They still have not passed any election laws regarding, requiring paper ballots. They still haven't stripped D.C. courts of jurisdiction. They still have yet to hold impeachment hearings on these activist judges that are stopping President Trump from trying to accomplish what he campaigned on and won on. And they still haven't held corrupt Democrats in Congress accountable. Briefly, I want to get into one thing. Governor Ron DeSantis had a fantastic idea on this. He says, on the judges thing, this is breaking news from just Thursday. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis just said he has submitted plans to President Trump's Department of Homeland Security that would allow Florida National Guard members to themselves become immigration judges. This would help swiffen the process of deportations, from apprehension to detention, even putting some of the people in our National Guard in line to serve as immigration judges to process this. Everything and anything possible, which is legal, to speed up the deportations, which are, unfortunately, our Republicans in Congress are dragging their heels on.
They are.
So, and what we're talking about, folks, is the federal judges have clamped down on this. They have barred the Trump administration from pulling funds from places it deems sanctuary cities, saying that policy is unconstitutional. Congress could rewrite that tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And change the jurisdiction. They could.
And kudos to Governor DeSantis, especially since he got elected to Congress in 2012. He knows his stuff, and I just wanted to give a shout out to him. He's absolutely right about this.
Well, and yes. Thomas Massie, as almost always, is spot on 100% right on this. He says the bigger scandal here is Congress funded sanctuary cities with the CR in March.
Exactly.
I was the only Republican in the House who refused to vote for that CR.
Thank you, Representative Massey, for that.
This is Thomas Massie, and he said this repeatedly, that it was counter to President Trump's agenda, and that judges would refer to it in their rulings. That's key there. So, Jim Banks, Todd Young, Aaron Houchin, they all voted for the Joe Biden funding of sanctuary cities, and judges are using that vote that Jim Banks, Todd Young, and Aaron Houchin voted yes for to justify going after Trump for trying to cut funds to these cities. Congress controls the power of the purse.
It's true.
Jim Banks, Todd Young, Aaron Houchin, they all want Biden funding for sanctuary cities. They voted for it. When they come to Lincoln Day dinners, they sure don't sound like that here.
Nope.
They're all like,
complete opposite.
It's complete opposite. But in D.C., it's the exact opposite, as Justin just said, exact opposite. And that's what we're so sick of, these career politicians. But the Democratic Party, though, is far, far worse. The vice chair of the DNC is now defending an MS-13 gang member.
I saw that. And shout out to Reince Priebus for taking him down.
Well,
Yes.
the Democratic Party is now the party of foreign terrorists.
Yeah. And David Hogg has proven that. Allegedly, they may fire him, but I don't know if that's true. They're so far to the left, they're going to keep him on.
It's a competition to see how far left they can go.
Yeah.
Well, they've lost their mind.
Well, of course.
Mindless.
Governor Pritzker of Illinois announced
no.
the state of Illinois will take punitive actions against El Salvador for facilitating the deportation of an MS-13 gang member. The Democratic Party is
Unbelievable.
utterly embarrassing. That's from Ian Jagger on X.
Oh, former Speaker Mike Madigan is probably happy about that as well.
Well, Mike Madigan, thankfully, is going to prison. He's been found guilty of racketeering and numerous
Well,
fraud.
remember all these Democratic politicians were running down there to the prison to hug these terrorists.
Chris Van
gang
Hollen.
members. Yeah.
who is one of the most
So who was-
anti-Israel members of the U.S. Senate.
So
Exactly.
here's the scandal on this. Who was really paying for it? And this is from Erica RN4 USA on Twitter. She says, "So, Leader John Thune, did you give the green light for Chris Van Hollen's trip to El Salvador on the taxpayer money as he has claimed? What's going on with that? Because they're all saying, oh, this is the Democrats just running down there, but the Republicans are funding it. in
And
the
John
Senate.
Thune is the majority leader.
He's allowing
We have every right to know who actually paid for that. We are so sick of politicians speaking one thing on one hand and then behind the scenes paying for the exact opposite.
doublespeak and lack of transparency.
We're talking about President Biden's green agenda in the tax bill. It's hypocrisy. Only 38 House and Senate GOP lawmakers say not repealing Biden's green agenda is a requirement. Only 38. We are at, I'm just shocked at this. Jim Banks, Todd Young, Aaron Houchin again. Why are we funding all this Green New Deal crap today yet, and why isn't it being stripped from the budget? Why does this even have to be discussed? There's no reason for it. We're going to be talking about climate change, quote unquote climate change, in the next segment, but it is just crazy. Why aren't the Republicans in Congress pulling the budget for these D.C. courts when judges are working on behalf of the Democrats to control the executive branch? Jim Banks, Todd Young, Aaron Houchin, those three are funding it.
They're funding
And
it.
I talk about Aaron a lot because she is in-house leadership.
Yes.
She has a role to play in this.
She's right in one of the leadership in the conference.
And what we are getting from that is Democratic priorities. It's crazy. This is from Tom Fitton on X. Stolen. This is a big deal. The Judicial Watch lawsuit alleges Republicans lost at least 2 congressional seats in California due to counting of votes received after Election Day in violation of federal law. What that means, folks, is the Republicans did not have to seat these 2 Democratic congressmen, but they did. You know very well Nancy Pelosi would not have seated a Republican congressman had the tables been turned.
And these were 2 competitive districts that were very important for us.
And the Republicans won them.
Yeah.
But these votes that mysteriously showed up after the election were counted by the state of California. They do not have to be counted in the U.S. House of Representatives. The U.S. House of Representatives has the ironclad decision-making on who gets to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, and they decide that and determine that. They do not have to seat these 2 Democrats who did not win the election, but they did.
They went along with it.
Well, and why did they do that? I think it's because there's a lot of Republicans that like to hide behind Democrats, and they would like to have that majority razor thin so they don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So they don't have to push through any of Trump's executive orders codified into federal law, which means that in 3.5 years, a new president could come just in and just start signing executive orders, doing away with every executive order that President Trump has signed.
And then Banks can talk about what he's going to do when the Republicans get power back, and it's a perpetual cycle, pretty much.
Well, they're working the clock.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything. We should be very concerned that Republicans in Congress are purposely going to hand over the majority to Democrats, just like in 2018.
Yeah.
Folks, remember that. 2018. Stall long enough so that Trump's executive orders aren't codified. No election laws on the books, and just go back to business as usual. That's from Kate P45 on Twitter. I agree 100%.
Absolutely. And let's remember, Hakeem Jeffries has bragged numerous times that he technically has the gavel. If they keep stalling, he will have the gavel, literally.
Well, I think they want it. Because then they can go back to...
They prefer... I think Mike Johnson probably prefers being in the minority. Not
exactly, because they can go back to continual
because it's easier to
fundraising.
sit around and complain.
Exactly.
Rather
You hit the
than
nail on
do
the
their
head.
jobs.
Exactly.
You both hit the nail on the head. They want to complain. They don't want to do their jobs and work for us.
Well, they don't want to find real government spending cuts. For instance, Daniel Horowitz pointed this out. The House and Senate Armed Services Republicans have coalesced around a plan for a $150 billion defense boost in the proposed spending this in July for this big, beautiful bill. Daniel Horowitz asked, I thought a third of the Pentagon budget was waste. Whatever happened to that?
Yeah.
Let's find out why they're paying $90,000 for a bag of washers.
Exactly.
Or $15,000 for a toilet seat.
Yikes.
That's got to be one expensive toilet seat.
Congress, Republicans, let's do our jobs and let's exercise some fiscal oversight. Let's call some hearings on this and find out why we're spending so much money when we don't have to.
Exactly.
So when we come back, folks, we're going to get right back into this. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. We are talking about our do-nothing Congress, who is sitting on their hands with zero accomplishments other than funding Joe Biden's spending priorities. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins has officially banned illegal aliens from receiving SNAP and food stamp benefits following Trump's orders. Where has the Republican Congress been on that?
Nowhere.
Nowhere to be found.
Nowhere. They are funding this, folks, and they've been funding this for over 2 years now. The Republicans regained the House of Representatives in January of 2023. They control every dollar of spending. Every dollar. But instead, Jim Banks and his buddy, Joe Biden, are funding these crazily leftist policies.
Very left wing.
Exactly. Go to house.gov and look at all the stuff. I would encourage folks to look and see. All the receipts are
Well,
there.
and it's not just leftist. It is the stuff that's going on by scamming. For instance, Doge has removed 11 million scammers from the Social Security system so far. 11 million people were taking Social Security benefits that you all out there worked your lives to collect, and it's going to someone else illegally that did not pay in to get it. If each fraudulent person was making just $1,800 a month, then Doge just saved Americans over $19 billion a month.
That is important. It's a lot of money.
That's
monumental.
A massive amount of money. And Congress has done nothing on this. They're just sitting there. If Social Security weren't run by the government, those who run it would be in prison.
Yeah.
This is from AKA Face US on Twitter. I really like this. She says, by the time I'm 67, I will have paid in over $600,000 into Social Security on my behalf. That money would have been worth $1.9 million if I'd gotten a 5% return. Her annual interest would be $95,000 a year. The government promises me $3,075 a month at age 67, which is just $37,000 a year. And it's because of this fraud and abuse. We can't fund Social Security at the levels they should be because Congress is doing nothing about any oversight. Zero oversight. There's not one bit of oversight. It is just write a blank check, and whoever is in charge over at Social Security, there's no consequences.
And there's nothing going on in the oversight committee either. I've been looking at that, and it's just business
No, they're
as
too
usual.
busy with whatever. They're just making a big political theater. It's not even real.
It's all for show.
Well, the Republican Congress budget resolution and eventual reconciliation is $7 trillion, nearly $2 trillion more than available to spend. That's $2 trillion in deficit spending. The 2024 budget under Biden was $6.8 trillion. We're higher than that. Guess what the budget was in 2019? It was $4.6 trillion. And we are $37 trillion in debt. It is just tax and spend, tax and spend. President Trump's doing what he can. If you recall, last week we were talking a little bit about Jim Banks tweeting out that he was going to introduce the legislation to stop funding NPR. Well, guess what? President Trump, I think he knew that any bill that Jim Banks wrote was, it's like, it's really just written on toilet paper. It's just not worth the paper it's printed on. So he just signed an executive order to defund NPR and PBS. So I'm calling on Jim Banks, codify President Trump's NPR ban into federal law.
Do it.
If you mean it, if you really believe that, Senator, do it.
If it's not
now
talk,
is your time.
Exactly. If it's not talk, then do it, especially the majority.
He filed that bill, 2 weeks ago, and it just went nowhere. President Trump's taking action. So at least, Jim, get this codified into federal law. But I wouldn't.
I'm not going to bet on it.
I
Folks, don't bet
wouldn't
on
hold. It's all about Congress trying to sabotage President Trump's agenda. All these people, they really can't stand President Trump, truth be told. Yes, they get his endorsement and all that, but it's all a shell game and it's all a ruse.
Just like with Lindsey Graham.
Just like Lindsey Graham,
helps me on the left.
Right, who Jim Banks loves to campaign with.
And had his endorsement.
Yeah.
Did he?
Oh, he did. He campaigned with him.
Oh, that tells you everything you need to know about that. Okay. This is from Todd Starnes. Is Congress intentionally trying to sabotage President Trump's America First agenda? Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote a lengthy post pointing out that in President Biden's first 100 days, the Democrat-controlled Congress delivered 11 bills to the president's desk. But in President Trump's first 100 days here, the Republican Congress only sent 5, and one of those was Biden's continuing resolution to keep the government open for business, which we're still under spending quotas for today. So we are still spending Biden priorities today.
Yeah.
Because of Congress failing to do their job, only working 25 days out of the last 115. President Trump has signed dozens of executive orders, and Congress should be working around the clock to codify these pieces of legislation into federal law. How difficult would it be for the House and Senate to stand up for female athletes, for protecting teachers from violence in the classroom? The American people sent Republicans to Washington with a mandate to implement America First policies that will make America great again. Once again, this is from Todd Starnes. Instead, it is business as usual on Capitol Hill.
They don't want to codify common sense.
Well, House Speaker Mike Johnson and Majority Leader John Thune are missing in action. They're AWOL.
Yeah.
This is from Todd Starnes still. I've noticed that the Republicans have plenty of time on their hands to sip martinis and attend country club fundraisers. It's just too bad they don't put the same sort of elbow grease into defending President Trump's agenda. Establishment Republicans are entrenched in the same beltway grift and corruption that the Democrats are. They are enriching themselves on all sorts of financial schemes paid for by the American taxpayers. That's from Todd Starnes. Can it's really like this. Imagine working 9 to 5 for 50 years. That's what you and I have to do.
Yeah.
Congress doesn't. They work a day and a half or 2 days a week.
It's a pretty nice gig for them.
Yeah.
And they just keep printing money. The Fed has printed over 40% of the national money supply just in the last 25 years. That has led to the inflation that is literally wiped away 20 years of your work. You are working your entire lives to pay all these federal taxes and to try to save money and buy a home. And Congress just keeps spending and spending and spending. Every member of Congress in both chambers should be considered to have a U next to their name for the Uniparty. That is what they really are.
It's the Uniparty grift.
As the late George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
We have to get power of the purse back to Congress where it's actually used. Back in 1996, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton cut a deal and consolidated power. This is still from Todd Starnes. Handing over our nation's purse to the 100 senators, taking away our voices from House members who we send to Congress to be our voice, removing our voices away from the decisions of where our tax dollars are spent altogether. The Congress, they don't want the job. They want the perks, but they don't want to show up for the responsibility. That's the main issue. Every year, there are supposed to be 12 House committee appropriations, 12 debates, and 12 individual votes on all 12 of our budget bills that come in from the House of Representatives. When they consolidated and the House of Representatives abdicated their authority over the nation's purse and gave all of our power, all of our voices to the 100-member Senate, all 12 of our debates and all 12 of our votes and all 12 of our budget bills were eliminated, silencing the American people who are supposed to be in control of their government. Once again, that's from Todd Starnes.
And he's right.
He's right on the money.
They need to show up at their committees and do the actual work. One of the things we're going to be doing on the show, folks, is showing how little these senators and Congress people actually show up for their committee assignments. It's shocking.
They don't put in any effort at all.
That's why the committees always look so empty.
Well,
exactly, because they don't show up.
Well, they're too busy trading stocks. Trump said he would sign a bill to ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks. I agree with this.
I agree.
100%. 100%. When you're working for the people, you need to be working for the people, not yourself.
Yeah.
Pure
and yet
and simple.
Nancy Pelosi, with the way she trades stocks, she could run a hedge fund.
Well, they're out looking for their donations, and one of their bigger donators is Big Pharma. Big Pharma spends 19 times more on advertising than they do on research. It's just another friendly reminder that it's never been about your health.
It's been about control.
Follow the money.
And it's about, making money. And these congressmen and senators, they're all in the pocket of Big Pharma. And this is why our health costs just go through the roof. It's crazy. So when we get back, folks, we'll get right back into this. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Here in the studio with Aidan Marietta and Justin George. Welcome back, guys.
Great to be back.
Great to be here.
So we're talking about our do-nothing Congress while the economy is reaching a crisis level. This is from Vanguard News. Vanguard reports that 4.8% of all 401k holders have recently taken hardship withdrawals. That is a record. Estimates are that there have been a 15% year-over-year spike in 401k hardship withdrawals so far this year. People are starting to tap into their retirement funds to make ends meet. Why are they doing that? It's because of inflation, pure and simple. Everything is so expensive, especially in Indiana with what gasoline prices are. $3.23 here in Franklin, and President Trump says they're $1.98. So why are we paying so much higher?
He must be looking at a different state. That probably has
thanks
lower
to the
prices.
state gas tax.
Yep. But we just have nothing. It's Congress. The border numbers are staggering. Under Biden, we averaged 11,000 to 15,000 border encounters a day. Under President Trump, just in the last 24 hours, there are only 178. 178. That's,
That's a good way to go down.
it is totally stopped almost.
Yeah. Still got more to do.
But we have to get a full border wall built from the Gulf of America to the Pacific Ocean. Not just talking about border security, we need a full and complete border wall built. This is from Libs of TikTok. It says, we don't need legislation to secure our border. All we needed was a new president. That's true for this 4 years. But I want to get the wall built now so that in 4 years, we're not facing the 15,000 a day again, it's just going to reverse course if a Democrat gets in 4 years.
Yeah. All it takes is the stroke of a pen.
Exactly.
Can you imagine if AOC gets in, how quickly
they'll never. The establishment of the Dems, I don't think they're going to let her.
I think she is the establishment of the Dems.
She might be now.
Just look
If
at
she takes out Schumer, we'll know what's going on.
Yeah, we'll know. If she takes out Schumer, that means she's going for the Senate.
Well, we need to protect ourselves from her. We need a full and complete border wall. And until we have that, everything is window dressing. These congressmen and senators, they're sitting there in Washington, D.C., far from the border, far from Indiana. Jim Banks lives in Virginia. He doesn't live in Indiana. Look what's happened. Just look what happened in Indiana or in Seymour this past week with the shooting. It is just a sad, sad situation. This is from Nick Sorter. So after 2 weeks of being on vacation, the House is back, and guess what they're focusing on? Congressional gold medals for hockey players.
Oh, man.
Not codifying Doge cuts, not codifying President Trump's executive orders, but medals for hockey players.
It's like, let the NHL figure that out.
Exactly. Why are they even doing that?
These career politicians, this is Nick Sorter's exact quote, these are some deeply unserious people.
Boom.
It's all about photo ops.
Yeah.
That's all it's about for them. They don't care about us.
Well, they released a picture this week of all the Republicans in the House out on the Capitol steps, and I tweeted back, I said, get back in there and do something.
That's the only
go
thing they've done.
codify something into law.
That's the only thing they've
Quit
done is
taking
gone
your
on the
picture.
steps.
I don't mind. I mean, it's like, I don't mind picture day, but do that before the Congress actually begins.
Well, Congress has the absolute authority on this. This is from Daniel Horowitz. He was watching the reconciliation markups, and it's interesting that they seem to place policy writers in the bills when they want to. So don't let them tell you we can't put immigration judicial reform provisions into the reconciliation. This big, beautiful bill, it should at least include that and all of President Trump's executive orders codified into that.
Including the protection of women's sports.
Exactly. Common sense. We need it.
And all it takes is for a Democrat to stroke that pen,
That's all
and it's
reversed.
gone. And then the NCAA goes back to doing what they've been doing.
Well, they're just watching the clock.
Yeah.
They don't work for
It's
us.
working the clock, just like in basketball. They think that their agenda is for their own selves is just getting reelected. They don't care about anything else. They don't give one whiff about what's going on in Indiana. They don't give one whiff about the gas tax being so high. And look what they're doing here in the state, where they're now talking about the toll roads. Making 465, I-69, I-70, I-74 toll roads. That's crazy. We have to stop that. Unfortunately, the Indiana GOP and the state legislature folks just passed enabling legislation to allow the governor to make all of those roads tolls at any time. We have to stop that right now. We cannot have 465 being a toll road. And I say this all the time, that if the Democrats were in charge, they would just make it all one big bike lane.
Yeah. They love bike lanes. Go to Marion County.
Right.
Go to see the bike lanes, which never get used. They are in better shape than the roads in Marion County.
Yeah, got to watch out for all the potholes there.
So Congress, they continue to take vacation after vacation, only working 25 out of the last 115 days.
Where are they flying to? I'd like to know.
I don't.
I'd like to know, too.
So they're not, okay. So this is on the big, beautiful bill that they're talking about. Congress won't get a bill on President Trump's desk until the 4th of July now.
Oh, come on.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. They don't work for us, and they don't care. They don't care.
Well, that's still 2 months away. And we are sitting here. We have real problems, and Congress continues today. That means today, folks, all of Biden's priorities are being funded today. So the courts can look at this and say, well, the Republican Congress just funded President Biden's sanctuary city policy, so President Trump can't undo that. So guess who's on the hook for that, folks? That means Jim Banks, Todd Young, and Aaron Houchin, who voted for that, who voted for Joe Biden's priorities just 2 months ago. It wasn't even 2 months ago. It was like 6 weeks ago.
Exactly.
Not too long ago.
While President Trump was still in office.
Exactly.
Thanks for doing nothing, Congress.
Nothing other than raising the debt by trillions and trillions of dollars. You know, that CR increased the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. The purchasing power of $100 in 1913, guess what it's worth today? $3. $100 in 1913 is now only worth $3. That is what exactly shows what career politicians are doing to our country. They just spend and spend, deflating the hard-earned dollars that you've worked your entire life for, that you're working for today. You know, you're working, unfortunately now you have to work to save up money for the tolls that are coming, and for the high gas taxes that we have to pay in the state of Indiana, and for the ridiculous property taxes increases. We've all seen these property tax increases that are through the roof. Yes, we're getting a $300 rebate, but that is minuscule compared to the amount of increase in the actual property tax because these assessments are going so high. We are becoming slaves to our national debt, folks. This is from the usual whales on Twitter. U.S. Treasury will now need to borrow $514 billion. This is an increase of 320% from the previous estimate. We have a ticking time bomb of debt, and Congress continues to do nothing about it other than they God bless them. The U.S. GOP House of Representatives are now pushing forward a plan for an additional $20 per vehicle fee in the GOP mega bill that's coming on July 4th. So, folks, they want you to pay an additional $20 just to have the car you already have. And it's the first of its kind. They have never had something like this in federal law.
It's unbelievable.
But they are federalizing taxes on cars at the local level now.
Whatever happened to the 10th Amendment?
And so this wasn't just Carlin Yoder, who was the state senator in Indiana, who pushed these local income taxes to increase taxes on cars. Now it is pushing this on every Hoosiers and everyone nationwide.
They want to push the big government on all of us.
Daniel Horowitz, God bless him, he says Republicans oppose all four goals of what we should be pushing for. And this is from Chip Roy's press office, actually. The Republicans now oppose cutting spending in the House and the Senate. Republicans oppose in the House and Senate, not here in Indiana, not us. I absolutely would be cutting spending. They oppose reducing the deficit. They oppose repealing the Green New Deal scam. They are just like bumps on the log, continuing to grow government. And what is the Republican Congress doing? This is from Thomas Massey again. He says it's the nanny state week in Congress this week. Yeah. So you know what they are up to this week? Speaker Johnson put 5 new regulations on the floor this week, including 2 written by Democrats. The Uniparty is flexing its muscle. This is from Thomas Massey.
Thank you, Representative Massey.
He voted no on all of them because bigger, more intrusive government isn't going to make America great again.
We have too much regulation as it is. One of the biggest ones was Dodd-Frank all those years ago, and now they're just only adding on more. This is just it's getting out of hand.
Exactly. Thank you, Representative Massey, for being a voice of one. Sometimes it's
but the Republican House with the leadership by Aaron Houchin is pushing for more regulations on Americans. That's all they see. And, back to this gasoline tax. In Minnesota, which has a much lower gasoline tax than Indiana, by the way.
That's shocking.
They just voted unanimously to keep their gas price taxes in place. Every Democrat voted to keep the gas price taxes in Minnesota. All the Republicans voted to lower gasoline prices in Minnesota. In Indiana, it's the exact opposite. Indiana GOP just wants to raise your taxes and put tolls on you for driving 465 and 65 and 70. Folks, we're out of time, but thank you so much for listening. We'll get back into this topic again in the future, I'm sure. Our Do Nothing Congress is doing nothing for us, but we are keeping an eye on them, and I'm going to keep shining the light and raising the curtain on what is going on in Washington. We have to elect real conservatives to Washington, not career politicians. This is John Rust. I want to close with my favorite Bible verse, Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Folks, I'll see you all again next week on the radio and now on podcasts. See you all next week. Bye-bye.